All right, welcome back to part 3, the final episode of chapter 1 as far as the PowerPoint is concerned. Now, I was introducing the 3 sociological paradigms: functionalist or structural functionalist, conflict, and symbolic interactionist. And now we're going to look at them in detail. All right. So, structural functionalist approach or functional approach, a framework for building theory, and this is a mouthful, that sees society as a complex system whose parts work together to promote solidarity and stability. Basically, what makes society tick, right? And there's a lot of important people, but Auguste Comte, the first person to coin the term sociology in 1838, great test question. Durkheim, Merton, and Spencer, all sociologists that you will be hearing about and that we'll look at and study this semester. And structural functionalist approach points to a couple things. The first thing, really, social structure. So any relatively stable pattern of social behavior, okay? And then this approach here, right? So our social functions, the consequences of a social pattern for the operation of a society. So what's the structure, okay? And what's the function? What are the consequences, right? So this approach looks for each structure's social patterns. And, maybe they function to tie people together according to this paradigm, keep society going, at least in its present form. That's kind of what structural functional is all about. So structure might be a handshake, right? If somebody puts their hand out to you, chances are you're not like, get away. It's a greeting. So the structure is college. What are some of the functions of college? All right? Pay a lot of money, get a degree, get a job then that pays you more money, hopefully, than the degree eventually. How about as a marriage broker, right? Like page 30 of the CSU handbook, right there. If I go to college, I'm going to hook up with somebody from CSU and we'll get married, and then we'll have babies that we can dress up in CSU gear. I'm kidding, but right? It doesn't say that. But some of the functions, right, are more expressed, and some of them are sort of more low-key or not really expressed. Marriage, function, procreate, love, having 2 incomes, right? So there's all these things that we could look at, the structure of things that we understand, and what is their function in society. And again, according to the structural functional approach, society is stable and orderly, and that's kind of how it's moving along. Now, we know that society isn't always that way, but according to this paradigm, it is. So when we look at what I was just talking about, functions that are stated and then functions that are not really stated, like that piece, like, you hook up and you get married you marry somebody from the college you go to school at, right? Manifest functions, okay? The recognized intended consequences of any social pattern. So it's these open and stated things, right? Like you go to college to get a degree, to get an education, to learn more. And it's the intended consequences of any aspect of society. Now, as a sociologist, that's interesting to me, but what's more interesting is this: latent functions, right? The unrecognized, unintended consequences of any social pattern. And here's what I like: unintended functions that may reflect the hidden purpose of an institution. Woohoo! As a sociologist, you've already got me, right? So maybe renting and damage deposit. I mean, a lot of times you don't get back your damage deposit. So the manifest function of a damage deposit is to cover their property if you as a renter damage it. If you just put holes in the wall and get the carpet dirty and all that, then they can get their money back at least somewhat. But I would say the latent function of that might be the unintended or hidden thing is just to take your money, right? The carpet's dirty, the walls are a little bit dirty, but you're allowed legally to be within a certain range. But oftentimes people who are landlords tack on these things, and it just serves as a way really to invest your money for a number of years or however long you're renting, and then take your money at the end. A lot of people who rent never get that money back, right? So we could look at that with anything. Maybe the Pledge of Allegiance, right? The stated function is to honor your country, but the manifest function, but the latent function would be like the under God part, right? To sort of put forth or push the dominant religious idea in a culture. Okay, one nation, we added under God many years later. So here's what we state is the function of it. And here's maybe also what's going on, which I think is always really interesting. So the main characteristic of this is its vision of society is stable and orderly. I walked out my front door. There's not zombies. Cars aren't crashing. Planes aren't dropping out of the sky. Yeah, it doesn't work for everybody, but. And I think that's one of the ways that we could be critical of this approach, right? I mean, how do you disagree? And that would be, or what would be something that you might disagree with? And that's that it's not functioning well for a lot of people. It's not just a few people, right? There's a lot of ways that this society functions only for certain people knowingly and at the detriment of others. So this is just one paradigm that we're looking at out of three. And like any of them, I would suggest that we don't, even if we favor one over another, that we try and get that culturally pluralistic or pluralistic view where we as sociologists can understand each of these sociological theories, okay? All right, social conflict approach. So it starts off the same way, a framework for building theory that sees society as an arena of inequality. That's what I said before, that generates conflict and change. And from this perspective, our behavior really, or social behavior, is best understood in terms of conflict, tensions amongst competing groups. Okay, so what are some of the highlights or the factors that are linked to inequality? Class, race, ethnicity, gender, age, relationship orientation, all sorts of things, right? We understand that. So we're going to talk about the different areas of inequality a lot this semester because as sociologists, we study them. This approach is also used to look at ongoing conflict between dominant and disadvantaged categories of people. And whereas the structural functional theory sees things as solidarity and stable and they're working, conflict is going to say, no, it's inequality. And it's inequality at the detriment of some while others benefit and gain, right? And oftentimes knowingly. We'll talk about that later this semester as well. So be critical of this approach. Look, things are working generally speaking, okay? And if you can see that society is not stagnant, maybe there is an equality in a certain realm, but it's much improved versus 50 or 60 years ago. And that's not across the board. Obviously, there are certain things that seem to never change, but some things do work in our society. So, seeing everything as always in conflict or unequal is not always the case as well. So here we go with some of these characteristics. Functionalist is on the left. Conflict is on the right. Functionalist society is composed of interrelated parts. It focuses on the whole group. Conflict, social inequality, competition amongst the parts. Functionalists on the left, individuals are responsible for their achievements as well as their failures. That's that pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And according to conflict, individuals often not responsible for their achievements or failures. And of course, those people are responsible for their failures and their achievements. However, what we're going to look at in conflict is that we know that there are systemic inequalities that are built into our system. You started the race a long time ago. I'm just starting it. So how can I be responsible for not owning a home as a person of color if you were redlining neighborhoods until 30, 40 years ago, right? And we'll look at the disparities across the line in many different things, but that's what it means. Oftentimes, it's the systemic inequalities that keep people from achieving to a certain degree, not necessarily their own. So macro and micro, I looked at this before. I'm going to skip over it. And now we're going to get to the third approach, the last one, symbolic interaction. And whereas the other two, conflict and functionalist, were macro ideas, these big ideas, symbolic interactionist is this framework that looks at the interaction of individuals, small groups, your family, your close-knit friend group, primary group, and it looks at that interpersonal communication, micro-level settings, right? I mean, how do human beings make sense of their realities? We sit in a classroom or virtually, but we know people sort of. We're around them for months and months and months. But what do we really know about them? I mean, it's interesting to me that we are all in this class, 200 of us or whatever it is. We all see things differently. We are all raised differently. And we are all each day and each moment constructing our reality different, right? And that goes to some of the most important things that we learn and know about and hold true, how people make sense of that and why that's different. We're going to look at that as a sociologist or in sociology this semester. All right, we've wrapped up with chapter 1. There are 3 episodes, episodes 1, 2, and 3. It's a trilogy. And that concludes it. So I'm going to head on to chapter 2, work at your own pace. And remember, be good people and do good things. And a little bit of music. I think I need a little something. Peace, everybody. Take care. Be good.